Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the burning remains of another human colony drift past his ship. 3 years had passed since the Zephyrian Empire first attacked Earth and her colonies. 3 long years of watching everything humanity had built across the stars crumble into ash and metal. The aliens were too strong and too advanced. Their ships moved faster than anything humans could build. Their weapons cut through human armor like paper. Their technology seemed like magic compared to what Earth could produce. Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the tactical display. Red dots marked Zephyrian positions throughout this sector. Blue dots showed human forces. There were not many blue dots left. The Defiance was one of only 12 ships remaining in the entire Earth defense fleet. 12 ships to protect billions of people across dozens of worlds. It was not enough. It had never been enough. Dr. Lisa Kane walked onto the bridge carrying a data pad. She was the ship's specialist for studying alien technology. Her job had become more important as the war went on. Every piece of Zephyrian equipment they could capture might hold the key to turning the tide. So far, they had found nothing useful. The aliens were just too far ahead of human science. "Captain, we need to talk about the readings from Kepler 442b, Kane said. Her voice was quiet but urgent. Morrison had learned to pay attention when Kane spoke like that. She was not the type to get excited over nothing. "What did you find down there?" Morrison asked. They had spent 2 days searching the ruins of the colony on Kepler 442b. The Zephyrians had hit it hard 6 months ago. Nothing should have survived. Kane activated her data pad and showed him the energy readings. "These signatures don't match anything in our database. They're not Zephyrian either. Something else was down there. Something old." Commander Ryan Torres looked up from his station. He was Morrison's second in command and had been fighting this war since the beginning. "How old are we talking about?" he asked. "The decay patterns suggest at least 200 years, Kane replied. "But that's impossible. Humans weren't even in this sector 200 years ago. We didn't have the technology to get here." Morrison studied the readings. The energy patterns were strange. They looked almost familiar, but not quite right. Like seeing a face you know, but can't quite place. "Could it be some kind of ancient alien technology?" he asked. "Maybe, but the quantum resonance suggests human origin," Kane said. "It's like finding a 20th century car engine in ancient Rome. It shouldn't exist, but the evidence is right here." Lieutenant Amy Foster turned from her communications station. She was young but sharp and had kept them alive through more than one close call. "Captain, I'm picking up a transmission from the outer system. It's very faint and heavily encrypted." "Zephyrian?" Torres asked. Foster shook her head. "No, sir. The encryption pattern is human, but it's not any code we use. It's much more advanced than anything in our systems." Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. Advanced human technology that shouldn't exist. Energy signatures that were impossible. A transmission from empty space using codes they had never seen. It all pointed to something that made no sense. "Can you trace the source of that transmission?" he asked. "Working on it, sir," Foster replied. Her fingers moved quickly over her console. "Got it. The signal is coming from the graveyard." Every person on the bridge went quiet. The graveyard was what spacers called the debris field around the dying star in this system. It was full of wrecked ships from dozens of different species. Some of the wrecks were thousands of years old. Ships went there to die and nothing ever came out. The radiation from the dying star made it impossible to get close enough for a detailed scan. "That can't be right," Torres said. "Nothing works in the graveyard. The radiation fries all electronics." "The signal is definitely coming from there," Foster confirmed. "And it's getting stronger." Kane looked at her readings again. "Captain, what if we've been thinking about this wrong? What if those energy signatures on the planet weren't left behind by whoever built the technology? What if they were pointing us towards something, like a trail of breadcrumbs?" Morrison stared at the tactical display. The graveyard was marked, in yellow on the screen. No ships ever went there. It was considered a dead zone. But if something was transmitting from inside it, then maybe it wasn't as dead as everyone thought. "Chief Engineer Collins, report to the bridge," he said into his communicator. Pete Collins arrived a few minutes later. He was an old man who had been fixing ships longer than Morrison had been alive. If anyone could get them into the graveyard and back out again, it would be Collins. "Pete, we need to get into the graveyard," Morrison said. "How much radiation shielding can you give us?" Collins scratched his gray beard. "Not much, Captain. That star is putting out enough radiation to cook us in minutes. Even with full shielding, we couldn't stay long." "How long?" Morrison asked. "Maybe 30 minutes before the radiation starts damaging critical systems," Collins replied. "Why do you want to go to that death trap anyway?" Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. They were good people who had followed him through hell for 3 years. He was about to ask them to follow him into something that might be worse. "Because I think there's something in there that might help us win this war," he said. The transmission from the graveyard grew stronger. The Defiance moved slowly through the outer edge of the graveyard. Dead ships drifted past the viewports like metal ghosts. Some were human vessels that had been lost over the decades. Others belonged to alien species that Morrison didn't recognize. The radiation levels climbed steadily as they moved deeper into the debris field. Collins worked frantically in engineering to keep the radiation shielding stable. Every few minutes, he would call the bridge to report another system starting to fail. They were running out of time fast. The dying star ahead of them pulsed with deadly energy that could kill them all if they stayed too long. Kane stood next to Morrison, studying her scanner readings. The energy signatures were getting stronger as they moved deeper into the graveyard. Whatever was sending the transmission was definitely in here somewhere. "Captain, I'm reading something big about 10 kilometers ahead," she said. "It's hidden, behind that cluster of wrecked freighters." Torres checked his tactical display. "I'm not seeing anything on my scans. The radiation is interfering with our sensors." "Trust me, it's there," Kane replied. "The quantum resonance is off the charts." Foster suddenly straightened at her station. "Captain, the transmission just changed. It's not encrypted anymore. It's sending in plain human standard." "What does it say?" Morrison asked. Foster listened to her earpiece for a moment. Her face went pale. "It says, 'Welcome home, Captain Morrison. We've been waiting for you.'" The bridge went dead silent. No one outside the ship knew they were here. They hadn't told Earth Command about their mission. The transmission shouldn't know Morrison's name or rank. Torres reached for his weapon, but Morrison held up a hand to stop him. "Who's sending that message?" Morrison asked. "Unknown, sir," Foster replied. "But it's coming from whatever Dr. Kane is. Tracking." Morrison made a decision that would change everything. "Take us in. Whatever's out there knows we're here anyway." The Defiance moved around the cluster of wrecked ships, and what they saw made everyone on the bridge gasp. Floating in the shadow of a massive alien battlecruiser was a human warship, unlike anything they had ever seen. It was huge, at least 3 times the size of the Defiance. Its hull was sleek and black with lines that seemed to flow like water. Strange symbols glowed along its sides with a soft blue light. "That's impossible," Torres whispered. "Humans don't build ships like that." Kane checked her readings again. "Captain, the quantum signature is definitely human, but the technology is centuries ahead of anything we have." The mystery ship was beautiful, but it was also clearly damaged. Scorch marks covered its hull, and several sections showed signs of battle damage. Whatever had happened to this ship, it had been through a serious fight. Morrison could see weapon impacts that looked like they had been made by Zephyrian energy cannons. Foster's voice was shaky when she spoke. "Captain, I'm getting a docking. Request from the ship. It's asking permission to bring us aboard." "Bring us aboard," Morrison repeated. "How big is that thing?" "Scans show it has internal docking bays large enough for ships twice our size," Kane said. "Captain, this vessel is more advanced than anything in the Earth fleet. If we can figure out how it works. Morrison didn't need her to finish the sentence. If they could understand the technology on that ship, they might finally have a weapon that could fight the Zephyrians on equal terms. Collins, how much time do we have before the radiation cooks us? He asked. The engineer's voice came through the comm with static. Maybe 15 minutes, Captain. After that, we start losing life support. Morrison looked at his crew. They were scared, but they trusted him. They had followed him this far into the impossible. Foster, tell them we accept their docking request, the foe. Mystery ship responded immediately. A section of its hull opened to reveal a massive hangar bay lit with the same blue glow as the symbols on the outside. The Defiance was guided in by some kind of tractor beam technology that was smoother than anything Morrison had ever experienced. As soon as they were inside the hangar, the bay doors closed and atmosphere flooded in around them. The radiation levels dropped to normal immediately. Whatever material the ship was made from it provided complete protection from the dying star's deadly energy. Morrison suited up in full combat gear and took Torres and Kane with him. If this was a trap, they would be ready for it. If it was salvation, they needed to understand it quickly. The airlock cycled, and they stepped onto the deck of the mystery ship. The interior was as impressive as the outside. The corridors were wide and tall with walls that seemed to glow with their own light. Everything was clean and new-looking despite the battle damage on the outside. Their footsteps echoed as they followed the signs toward what appeared to be the bridge. They passed rooms full of equipment that Morrison didn't recognize. Kane stopped to scan some of the devices with her instruments. "Captain, this technology is incredible," she said. "These are weapons designed specifically to fight Zephyrian ships. Look at these power readings." Torres kept his rifle ready as they moved deeper into the ship. "This feels like a trap," he said. "Ships don't just wait in radiation zones for centuries." They reached a large door marked with symbols that somehow Morrison could read, even though he had never seen them before. The words said, "Command Center." The door opened as they approached, and they walked onto the bridge of the mystery ship. The command center was enormous, with stations for dozens of crew members, but it was empty except for one figure sitting in the captain's chair. It was a human man in an old-style Earth Fleet uniform. He was very old and very thin, but his eyes were bright and alert. "Welcome aboard the UES Vindication," the old man said. "I'm Captain Frank Miller, and I've been waiting 200 years to meet you." Captain Frank Miller stood slowly from his chair. He moved like a man much older than he appeared, but his uniform bore the insignia of the Earth Deep Space Exploration Fleet. That organization had been disbanded over a century ago. Morrison kept his hand near his weapon, but something about the old man seemed familiar and trustworthy. "Captain Miller," Morrison said carefully. "According to our records, the UES Vindication was lost during a deep space mission in 2187. That was 200 years ago." Miller smiled sadly. "Time is more complicated than most people think, Captain Morrison. The Vindication didn't just disappear. We were thrown forward through time by an experimental drive malfunction. When we arrived in this era, we found something terrible waiting for humanity." Kane stepped forward with her scanner active. "Captain Morrison, the quantum signatures are consistent with temporal displacement. Somehow this ship really has traveled through time." Torres kept his rifle ready but lowered it slightly. "If you're from 200 years ago, how do you know about the Zephyrian invasion? How do you know Captain Morrison's name?" Miller walked to a large display screen that activated at his approach. The screen showed images of burning human colonies and Zephyrian warships. "Because, Captain Torres, we've been watching and waiting. When the temporal drive threw us forward, we arrived 50 years before the Zephyrians attacked. We had time to prepare." The screen changed to show star maps with invasion routes marked in red. Morrison recognized the patterns. They matched exactly what had happened during the real invasion. "You knew they were coming," he said. "We knew everything that was going to happen," Miller replied. The Vindication's AI system spent decades studying the timeline. We watched the invasion unfold through quantum sensors. We saw every battle humanity lost, every colony that fell, every ship that died. Morrison felt cold. If you knew what was going to happen, why didn't you warn Earth Command? Why didn't you help? Miller's expression grew pained. We tried, Captain, but temporal mechanics don't work that way. Every time we interfered with events, the timeline shifted and made things worse. The only way to save humanity was to wait for exactly the right moment. Kane was studying her readings intently. Captain, Miller, the energy signatures I detected on Kepler 442b. Those were markers you left behind, weren't they? Breadcrumbs, Miller confirmed, leading the right people to the right place at the right time. The quantum resonance was keyed specifically. To your ship, Captain Morrison. You and your crew are the only ones who could find us. Torres looked skeptical. Why us? We're just one ship. Earth has other captains with more experience. Because you're the ones who survive, Miller said simply. In every timeline we observed, Captain Morrison and his crew were among the last to keep fighting when everyone else gave up. You have something the others lack. Morrison walked to the tactical display. It showed the current positions of all human and Zephyrian forces in real time. The technology was far beyond anything Earth possessed. What exactly are you asking us to do, Captain Miller? Miller joined him at the display. Help us finish what we started. The Vindication spent 50 years being upgraded and modified. Every system on this ship was designed specifically to fight the Zephyrians. We have weapons that can penetrate their shields, engines that can outrun their fastest ships, defenses that can stop their most powerful attacks. Kane was practically vibrating with excitement. Captain Morrison, if even half of what he's saying is true, this ship could turn the entire war around. There's something else, Miller said. His voice became grave. The Zephyrians aren't the real threat. They're running from something worse, something called the Devourers that will arrive in this galaxy eventually. The Zephyrian invasion was just the beginning. Morrison studied the old captain's face. Miller believed every word he was saying. The question was whether Morrison could afford to believe it too. What happened to your crew, Captain Miller? They didn't survive the temporal transition, Miller said quietly. I've been alone on this ship for 200 years waiting for this moment. The only thing that kept me going was knowing that humanity still had a chance. Torres lowered his rifle completely. Captain Morrison, we need to get back to the Defiance and report this to Earth Command. No, Miller said firmly. Earth Command can't know about this yet. There are people in positions of power who would try to use the Vindication for their own purposes. This ship needs to remain secret until the time is right. Morrison made another decision that would change everything. What do you need from us, Captain Miller? Miller activated another display showing the ship's status. Many systems showed red warning indicators. The Vindication needs repairs and a crew. Most importantly, we need to test the weapons and systems in actual combat. But we also need to be very careful about how we reveal ourselves. Kane was already studying the technical readouts. Captain Morrison, this technology is incredible. These weapon systems are designed to specifically counter Zephyrian defenses. If we could outfit the entire Earth fleet with this technology. One step at a time, Dr. Kane, Miller said. First, we need to prove that the systems work. Then we need to gather the right people. People who can be trusted with this secret. Morrison looked around the bridge of the Vindication. It was exactly what humanity needed to win the war. But it was also dangerous. In the wrong hands, this technology could be used to conquer instead of liberate. Captain Miller, what assurance do I have that you're telling the truth? Miller smiled and walked to a console near the captain's chair. Let me show you something that will convince you. The main screen activated and showed a recording. Morrison watched himself standing on the bridge of the Defiance having the exact conversation they had just finished. But in the recording, Morrison was older and wearing an admiral's uniform. The date stamp showed it was from 5 years in the future. This is one possible timeline, Miller explained. One where you help us and humanity wins the war. There are others where humanity falls. The choice is yours, Captain Morrison, but choose quickly. The Zephyrians are planning something big and we don't have much time. Morrison stared at the recording of his future self and made his choice. What do you need us to do first? He asked. Miller brought up a star chart showing the nearby systems. The Vindication needs quantum crystals to power its main weapons. There's a Zephyrian mining station called Nexus 7 about 3 days from here. They're processing exactly what we need. Torres studied the tactical data. That station is heavily defended. Our intelligence shows at least 20 warships and orbital defense platforms. With conventional human technology, you would be right, Miller said. But the Vindication has something the Zephyrians have never seen before. Adaptive stealth systems that can fool their sensors completely. Kane was already downloading technical specifications to her portable scanner. Captain Morrison, this stealth technology is based on principles we never knew existed. It doesn't just hide the ship visually, it actually shifts the vessel slightly out of phase with normal space. Miller activated the ship's AI system. A holographic woman appeared at the center of the bridge. She looked human, but moved with perfect precision that marked her as artificial intelligence. This is Aria, Miller said. She's been analyzing Zephyrian technology for 200 years. The AI spoke with a pleasant voice that somehow conveyed vast intelligence. Captain Morrison, I have observed the Zephyrians in over 3,000 combat scenarios. Their tactical patterns are predictable once you understand their psychology. They believe they are superior to all other species, and that makes them overconfident. Morrison found himself trusting the AI immediately. There was something about her that reminded him of the best human officers he had served with. Aria, what are our chances of success at Nexus 7? With current human technology, the mission would have a 12% chance of success, Aria replied. With the Vindication systems, the probability increases to 87%. Torres looked impressed, despite himself. Those are better odds than we've had in years. Miller walked to the weapons console. The Vindication carries quantum disruptors specifically designed to penetrate Zephyrian shields. We also have temporal mines that can create localized time distortions. The Zephyrians won't know what hit them. Morrison made another quick decision. We'll need to bring some of my crew aboard to help operate this ship. Kane will want to study the technology. Collins will need to understand the engineering systems. Agreed, Miller said. But everyone who comes aboard needs to understand the stakes. This mission must remain secret until we're ready to reveal the Vindication to the rest of humanity. They spent the next several hours transferring essential crew members from the Defiance to the Vindication. Collins took one look at the engine room and declared it the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Foster was amazed by the communication systems that could monitor Zephyrian transmissions in real time. Lieutenant Amy Foster quickly adapted to the advanced sensor arrays. Kane worked with Aria to understand the stealth systems. The technology was incredibly complex, but the AI made it simple to operate. The phase shifters move us slightly out of normal space-time, Aria explained. Zephyrian sensors cannot detect objects that exist in temporal flux. Morrison found himself in command of the most advanced warship humanity had ever built. The bridge responded to his thoughts as much as his spoken commands. The tactical systems showed him information about enemy positions and capabilities that Earth Command could only dream of having. 3 days later, they arrived at Nexus 7. The Zephyrian mining station was exactly as their intelligence had described. Massive orbital platforms processed raw materials while warships patrolled the surrounding space. The station itself was built into an asteroid and heavily shielded. "Activating stealth systems," Area announced. The Vindication seemed to shimmer and then disappeared from all sensors. Even Morrison couldn't see his own ship on the tactical display. They moved slowly through the Zephyrian patrol fleet. Enemy ships passed within a few hundred meters without detecting them. Morrison watched Zephyrian bridge crews going about their normal duties, completely unaware that death was floating silently past them. Kane had identified the specific storage facilities where the quantum crystals were kept. The plan was simple. Get in quickly, take what they needed, and get out before the Zephyrians could respond. Miller had insisted on leading the boarding party himself, despite his age. "Captain Miller, you should stay on the bridge," Morrison said. "Let my people handle the infiltration." Miller smiled grimly. "Captain Morrison, I've been preparing for this mission for 200 years. I'm not staying behind now." The Vindication deployed stealth shuttles that were as invisible as the main ship. Morrison led one team while Miller led another. They approached the station from different angles to confuse any response. The station's defenses were impressive, but they were designed to stop conventional attacks. The stealth shuttles passed through the defensive screens like they weren't even there. Morrison's team landed in a cargo bay while Miller's team hit the main processing center. Inside the station, Morrison saw Zephyrian technology up close for the first time. Everything was sleek and efficient, but also cold and sterile. The aliens had no sense of beauty or creativity in their designs. They built things that worked, but had no soul. Torres and his security team moved through the corridors like ghosts. Their new equipment made them almost as invisible as their shuttles. Zephyrian guards walked past them without seeing anything unusual. They reached the crystal storage facility and found exactly what they needed. Thousands of quantum crystals were stored in specially shielded containers. Each crystal contained enough energy to power a human city for years. Kane started selecting the specific types they needed for the Vindication's weapons. Then everything went wrong. An alarm began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red and security doors started slamming shut. Morrison heard Area's voice through his communicator. "Captain Morrison, the Zephyrians have detected our presence. They're deploying hunter-killer drones throughout the station." Morrison grabbed as many crystal containers as he could carry. "All teams extraction, now," he ordered. They had what they came for, but getting out alive was going to be much harder than getting in. Morrison's team ran through the station corridors as hunter-killer drones swarmed around them. The Zephyrian machines were fast and deadly, but they seemed to have trouble targeting the humans with their stealth equipment. Energy beams shot past them as they reached their shuttle. Torres provided cover fire while Kane and the others loaded the quantum crystals aboard. Morrison could hear Miller's team fighting their way through another section of the station. The old captain was moving faster than someone his age should be able to move. "Miller to Morrison," came the call over their communications. "We've got what we need, but they're bringing up heavy security. Get your people out now." Morrison made sure his team was aboard their shuttle before responding. "Miller, we're not leaving without you." "That's an order, Captain," Miller replied. "Get those crystals back to the Vindication. The mission is more important than any of us." Morrison ignored the order and piloted his shuttle toward Miller's position. He could see the old captain and his team pinned down by Zephyrian security forces. The aliens had brought up plasma cannons that could punch through the stealth equipment. Shuttle's weapon systems came online. Morrison had never used Zephyrian-designed weapons before, but they responded to his thoughts as smoothly as human equipment. He fired quantum disruptors at the enemy positions and watched Zephyrian soldiers disappear in flashes of blue light. Miller's team made it to their shuttle as Morrison provided cover. Both small ships launched from the station as more alarms began sounding. Zephyrian fighters were scrambling from the orbital platforms. The stealth systems would only hide them for so long. They made it back to the Vindication just as the enemy ships began random firing patterns to try to hit invisible targets. Aria had already prepared the ship for immediate departure. The quantum crystals were loaded into the weapon systems as they accelerated away from Nexus 7. Stealth systems failing, Aria announced. The Zephyrians are using wide-spectrum sensors to track our engine emissions. Morrison watched the tactical display as 20 Zephyrian warships moved to intercept them. The enemy vessels were faster and more heavily armed than anything in the human fleet. Under normal circumstances, the Vindication would be destroyed in minutes. Aria, prepare the main weapons, Miller ordered from his position at the tactical station. Let's show these aliens what human ingenuity looks like. The Vindication dropped its stealth systems and appeared on every Zephyrian sensor screen. Morrison watched the enemy ships react with surprise. They had been expecting a small human raider. Instead, they found themselves facing a warship that was larger and more advanced than their own vessels. The first Zephyrian ship fired plasma cannons at the Vindication. The energy beams struck the human ship's shields and simply stopped. The quantum barriers absorbed the attack completely and converted the energy into power for their own weapons. "Quantum disruptors firing," Aria announced. Beams of blue energy lanced out from the Vindication and struck 3 Zephyrian ships. The enemy vessels exploded immediately as their own shields were turned against them. Morrison had never seen anything destroy Zephyrian ships so easily. The remaining enemy ships changed tactics and tried to surround the Vindication. Morrison watched them move with the same overconfident patterns that Aria had predicted. The Zephyrians believed their numbers would give them victory. Miller activated the temporal mines. Small devices appeared around the enemy fleet and began creating localized time distortions. Several Zephyrian ships found themselves moving in slow motion, while others were accelerated beyond their ability to control. The neat formation broke, apart as the aliens tried to deal with weapons they didn't understand. Kane watched from her science station as the Vindication systems performed exactly as designed. "Captain Morrison, the quantum crystals are allowing the weapons to operate at full power. We could fight an entire Zephyrian fleet with this technology." Morrison targeted the largest enemy ship and fired the main disruptor array. The beam punched through the Zephyrian flagship's shields and armor like they were made of paper. The massive vessel broke apart as its power core overloaded. The remaining Zephyrian ships retreated toward Nexus 7. Morrison considered pursuing them, but Miller stopped him. "Let them go, Captain. They need to report what they've seen. The Zephyrians need to know that humanity is no longer helpless." Torres checked the damage reports. "All systems green. We took a few hits, but the quantum shields held perfectly. I've never been in a battle where we weren't worried about being destroyed." Foster was monitoring Zephyrian communications. "Captain, they're sending emergency transmissions to their fleet commanders. They're reporting a new type of human warship with impossible technology." Morrison sat back in the captain's chair and tried to process what had just happened. For 3 years, humanity had been losing every battle against the Zephyrians. Now they had just destroyed most of an enemy fleet without taking serious damage. The Vindication was everything Miller had promised and more. Kane was already analyzing the captured quantum crystals. Captain Morrison, these crystals contain enough energy to power our weapons for months of continuous combat. We could take on the entire Zephyrian war fleet. Miller walked over to Morrison with a serious expression. Captain, this was just the beginning. The real test comes when we reveal the vindication to the rest of humanity. Not everyone will be happy to learn that Earth has a secret weapon. Morrison knew the old captain was right. The existence of the vindication would change everything about the war. Some people would want to use it for revenge against the Zephyrians. Others would try to control it for their own purposes. The technology was too powerful to be trusted. To just anyone, Arya displayed a star chart showing current Zephyrian positions throughout human space. Captain Morrison, I have identified several target opportunities where the vindication could liberate human colonies with minimal risk. We could begin turning the tide of the war immediately. Morrison studied the tactical options. They could start hitting Zephyrian positions right away. Every day they waited meant more human deaths and more lost colonies. But they also needed to be smart about how they revealed their capabilities. Plot a course for the Titan system, Morrison ordered. If we're going to announce ourselves to the galaxy, we might as well do it properly. The Titan system had been under Zephyrian control for 8 months. It was home to 3 million human colonists who were now slaves working in alien mining operations. The system also served as a major supply depot for Zephyrian forces attacking deeper into human space. Taking it back would be a huge victory for humanity. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vindication as they approached the outer system. Aria's sensors showed him exactly what they were facing. 12 Zephyrian warships patrolled the space around Titan. Orbital defense platforms surrounded the planet itself. The enemy had turned the human colony into a fortress. Miller joined him at the tactical display. The old captain had been working for days to prepare detailed attack plans. The Zephyrians have made some changes since we last observed this system. They've added quantum torpedoes to the defense platforms. Kane looked up from her science station. Captain Morrison, those torpedoes use the same technology as our disruptors. The Zephyrians must have reverse-engineered weapons from previous battles. Morrison wasn't surprised. The aliens were quick to adapt human innovations to their own purposes. But they still didn't understand the full scope of what humanity was capable of creating. Aria, how do our current systems compare to their new weapons? The Zephyrian quantum torpedoes are based on incomplete understanding of the technology, the AI replied. Their versions are approximately 40% as effective as our systems. They pose a threat, but not a serious one. Torres checked the status of their own weapons. Captain, we're carrying enough firepower to destroy everything in this system. But there are 3 million human civilians down there. We need to be careful about collateral damage. Morrison had been thinking about the same problem. The Zephyrians were using human slaves as shields. Any attack on the orbital platforms risked killing the people they were trying to save. Miller, do we have any non-lethal options? The old captain smiled grimly. As a matter of fact, we do. The Vindication carries something called neural disruptors. They can shut down Zephyrian nervous systems without harming humans. The aliens will be unconscious for hours. Foster reported incoming transmissions from the Zephyrian fleet. Captain, they're demanding that we identify ourselves and leave the system immediately. They're threatening to destroy us if we don't comply. Morrison opened a channel to the enemy fleet. It was time to announce humanity's return to the war. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Vindication. You are ordered to release all human prisoners and evacuate this system within 1 hour. The response came back immediately. Zephyrian voices speaking in their harsh, clicking language. Foster translated. "They're laughing at us, Captain. They say one human ship cannot stand against their entire fleet." Miller activated the weapons systems. "Captain Morrison, may I suggest we demonstrate the error in their thinking?" The Vindication dropped its stealth systems and appeared on every sensor screen in the system. Morrison watched the Zephyrian fleet react with confusion and then alarm, as their sensors registered the human ship's true size and capabilities. The first enemy ships moved to intercept them. Morrison let them come close enough to get a good look at what they were facing. Then he gave the order to fire. Quantum disruptors lanced out from the Vindication and struck 4 Zephyrian ships simultaneously. The alien vessels exploded in brilliant flashes of light that could be seen from the planet's surface. The remaining 8 ships immediately changed course and began retreat maneuvers. "Neural disruptors ready," Arya announced. "Targeting orbital. Defense platforms." Morrison gave the order and watched invisible beams strike the platforms around Titan. The Zephyrian crews simply collapsed at their stations. The massive weapons fell silent as their operators lost consciousness. The planet's defenses were neutralized without killing a single alien. Kane monitored the effects on the human population. "Captain Morrison, the neural disruptors are only affecting Zephyrian nervous systems. Human colonists are unharmed. The remaining Zephyrian fleet tried to make a coordinated attack on the Vindication. 12 ships firing together should have been enough to overwhelm any single vessel, but the quantum shields absorbed their weapons fire and converted it into power for human systems. Morrison returned fire with the main disruptor array. 3 more Zephyrian ships vanished in explosions that lit up space like small suns. The surviving vessels broke formation and scattered in all directions. Their coordinated attack had become a panicked retreat. Torres tracked the fleeing ships on his sensors. "Captain Morrison, should we pursue them?" "No," Morrison replied. "Let them run. I want them to report what they've seen here." Foster was monitoring communications from the planet's surface. "Captain, I'm getting transmissions from human colonists. They're asking if Earth has finally sent help." Morrison opened a channel to the planet. "This is Captain Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. The Zephyrian occupation of this system is over. Repeat, the occupation is over. Human ships are on the way to assist with evacuation and medical aid." The response from the planet was immediate. Cheering voices filled the communication channels as 3 million people learned they were free. Many of them had given up hope of ever seeing Earth ships again. The Vindication had given them back their future. Kane was analyzing the battle. Results. "Captain Morrison, we destroyed 7 Zephyrian warships and neutralized all their orbital defenses. Our own damage is minimal. The quantum shields never dropped below 90% efficiency." Miller walked over to Morrison with a satisfied expression. "Captain, this is exactly what we hoped would happen. One human ship with the right technology was able to defeat an entire Zephyrian fleet." Arya displayed tactical analysis of the battle. "The Zephyrian retreat pattern suggests they will report this engagement to their regional command structure. Word of the Vindication's capabilities will spread throughout their empire within days." Morrison studied the star charts showing Zephyrian positions throughout human space. "How many more systems can we hit before they start adapting their tactics?" "At least a dozen," Miller replied. "Maybe more if we're smart about choosing our targets, but eventually they'll start concentrating their fleets to counter us." Torres brought up intelligence reports about other occupied systems. "Captain Morrison, there are human populations under Zephyrian control throughout this sector. If we can free even half of them, it would be a huge victory." Morrison made his decision. "Arya, plot courses for the nearest occupied systems. We're going to hit them fast before the Zephyrians can organize a response. Foster reported new communications from Earth Command. Captain Morrison, Earth Defense Headquarters, is requesting immediate contact. They're asking about reports of a major victory in the Titan system. Morrison realized that word of their success was already spreading through human space. Earth Command would want to know how one ship had accomplished what their entire fleet couldn't do. The secret of the vindication couldn't be kept much longer. Miller seemed to read his thoughts. Captain Morrison, it's time to contact Earth. Humanity needs to know that the war has changed. Admiral Helen Cross sat in the Earth Defense Command Center and stared at the reports coming in from across human space. In the past week, someone had liberated 6 star systems from Zephyrian control. 7 enemy fleets had been destroyed with minimal human casualties. It was impossible, but it was happening. The tactical displays showed free human systems lighting up in blue across sectors that had been red for months. Whatever was out there was hitting the Zephyrians faster than they could respond. Each victory was more decisive than the last. Cross activated her communication system and tried once again to contact Captain Morrison. The Defiance had been listed as missing for 2 weeks, but intelligence reports suggested Morrison was somehow involved in the recent victories. This is Admiral Cross calling Captain Morrison. Respond immediately. The response came back on a frequency that Earth Command had never used before. Morrison's voice was clear and confident in a way that Cross hadn't heard since the war began. Admiral Cross, this is Captain Morrison aboard the UES Vindication. Request permission to approach Earth. Cross checked her database. There was no ship called Vindication in the Earth fleet. Captain Morrison, what is your current vessel? Our records show you commanding the UES Defiance. Admiral, it's complicated, Morrison replied. I need to brief you in person on recent developments. The war situation has changed dramatically. Cross made a decision that would change everything for Earth. Captain Morrison, you are cleared for immediate approach to Earth orbit. I want to see this vindication for myself. 6 hours later, Cross stood in the observation deck of Earth Defense Station Alpha and watched something impossible approach. The ship that appeared on her screens was larger than anything in the human fleet. Its hull was sleek black metal with glowing blue symbols along the sides. It moved with grace that made their best ships look clumsy. The Vindication took up position in Earth orbit, and Cross got her first good look at humanity's secret weapon. The ship was beautiful and terrible at the same time. She could see weapon systems that looked nothing like human technology. The entire vessel radiated power and confidence. Morrison transported directly to the station using technology that Earth Command didn't possess. He was accompanied by an elderly man in an ancient Earth Fleet uniform and a woman Cross recognized as Dr. Lisa Kane. They walked into her office like they owned the galaxy. Admiral Cross, Morrison said formally. I'd like you to meet Captain Frank Miller of the UES Vindication. Cross studied the old man carefully. His uniform bore insignia she hadn't seen since Academy history classes. Captain Miller, according to our records, you disappeared 200 years ago during a deep space exploration mission. Miller smiled sadly. Time travel is complicated. Admiral Cross, the important thing is that the Vindication is here now when humanity needs it most. Cross listened as Morrison and Miller explained everything. The temporal displacement, the 50 years of preparation, the weapons designed specifically to fight Zephyrians. It was incredible, but the evidence was floating in orbit above them. Captain Miller, why reveal yourselves now? Cross asked. Why not sooner when we were losing so badly? Because, Admiral, the timeline had to develop correctly, Miller replied. If we had interfered too early, the Zephyrians would have adapted their tactics. We needed them to become overconfident before we struck. Cross activated her tactical displays and showed them the current war situation. Captain Morrison, your recent victories have changed everything. Zephyrian forces are retreating throughout this sector, but intelligence suggests they're massing their main fleet for a counterattack. Kane spoke up from her position near the window. Admiral Cross, the Zephyrians are planning to attack Earth directly. Aria has intercepted their communications. They're bringing everything they have left. Cross felt cold fear settle in her stomach. How many ships are we talking about? Morrison answered grimly. Over 300 Zephyrian warships, the largest fleet they've ever assembled. They're planning to destroy Earth and end human resistance permanently. Cross looked at the Vindication through the window. The ship was impressive, but it was only one vessel. Captain Morrison, can the Vindication handle a fleet that size? Miller and Morrison exchanged glances. Not alone, Miller admitted. But we don't have to fight alone. Admiral Cross, it's time to share the Vindication's technology with the rest of the Earth fleet. Cross had been hoping for exactly that answer. What do you need from us? Kane activated a portable display showing technical specifications. Admiral Cross, the quantum disruptor technology can be adapted to existing human ships. We can't make them as advanced as the Vindication, but we can make them effective against Zephyrian shields. Morrison pulled up fleet deployment charts. Admiral Cross, we need every ship Earth can spare. The Zephyrian attack fleet will arrive in 72 hours. We have that long to prepare. Cross made the biggest decision of her career. I'm authorizing immediate implementation of the new technology across the entire Earth fleet. Captain Morrison, you have complete authority to coordinate our defenses. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Human engineers worked around the clock to install quantum disruptors on every available ship. The technology was complex, but Kane and her team had simplified it enough for rapid deployment. Collins supervised the installation of new shield generators on the larger vessels. The quantum barriers couldn't match the Vindication's capabilities, but they were still far superior to anything Earth had possessed before. Foster coordinated communications between hundreds of ships as the Earth fleet assembled. Messages came in from human colonies across the galaxy, offering whatever ships they could spare. The final battle was about to begin, and everyone wanted to be part of it. Aria provided tactical analysis of the approaching Zephyrian fleet. The enemy formation suggests they plan to overwhelm Earth's defenses through sheer numbers. They are not expecting significant resistance. Cross stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the largest human fleet in history take position around Earth. 200 ships equipped with technology that had seemed impossible just days before. It still wasn't enough to match Zephyrian numbers, but it would have to be enough. Morrison took position on the Vindication at the center of the human formation. The ancient warship would serve as the command vessel for the desperate defense of humanity's homeworld. Everything they had worked for came down to the next few hours. Admiral Cross, this is Captain Morrison, came the transmission from the Vindication. Zephyrian fleet detected at the edge of the system. They'll be in firing range in 30 minutes. Cross looked out at the stars and saw the first flashes of light that marked enemy ships dropping out of hyperspace. The final battle for Earth was about to begin. The Zephyrian fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. 300 warships arranged in perfect formation, bearing down on Earth. Admiral Cross had never seen so many enemy vessels in one place. Their combined firepower could reduce planets to ash. Morrison watched from the Vindication's bridge as the alien fleet approached. Aria's sensors showed him every detail of the enemy formation. The Zephyrians were confident they could crush human resistance once and for all. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Miller stood at the tactical station studying the enemy. Deployment. Captain Morrison, they're using the same attack pattern we observed in the timeline projections. Hammer formation designed to concentrate maximum firepower on a single point. Cross opened a channel to all human ships. This is Admiral Cross to all vessels. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for the future of humanity itself. Show these aliens what humans are capable of when we stand together. The response came back from 200 ship captains. Human voices joined together in defiance of an enemy that had conquered half the galaxy. Morrison felt pride swell in his chest as he listened to his species refuse to surrender. Aria announced tactical status. Enemy fleet entering optimal firing. Range in 60 seconds. All human vessels report ready for combat. Quantum disruptor arrays charged and standing by. Morrison opened a channel to the Zephyrian fleet. It was time to give them one last chance to avoid destruction. This is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Vindication. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. This is your only warning. The Zephyrian response came back in their harsh, clicking language. Foster translated with grim satisfaction. They're telling us to surrender or be destroyed. They say resistance is futile. Miller smiled coldly. Captain Morrison, I believe it's time to show them how futile their invasion really is. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire first. Hundreds of plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes lanced out toward the human formation. The barrage was massive enough to vaporize any conventional fleet. But the Earth ships were no longer conventional. Quantum shields flared to life around the human vessels. Enemy weapons struck the barriers and simply stopped. The energy was absorbed and converted to power human systems. What should have been a devastating first strike became a source of strength. Morrison gave the order that changed the course of galactic history. All ships fire. 200 quantum disruptor arrays fired simultaneously. Blue beams of energy reached out across space and struck the Zephyrian fleet. Alien ships began exploding as their own shields were turned against them. The perfect enemy formation broke apart as captains tried to avoid weapons they couldn't understand. Cross watched. From her flagship, as impossible became reality. Human ships were destroying Zephyrian vessels with single shots. Enemy weapons that had terrorized the galaxy for years couldn't penetrate the new defensive systems. The tide of war was turning before her eyes. The Vindication moved through the battle like an avenging angel. Morrison's ship was larger and more advanced than anything else in the fight. Quantum disruptors fired continuously, cutting through enemy formations. Temporal mines created time distortions that trapped entire squadrons of alien ships. Kane monitored the battle from her science station. Captain Morrison, enemy fleet strength down to 200 ships. Their formation is completely broken. Some vessels are trying to retreat. Torres coordinated the human attack from his tactical position. Captain Morrison, Admiral Cross is requesting that we pursue the retreating ships. She wants to destroy their entire fleet. Morrison considered the request. They could probably hunt down most of the fleeing Zephyrians. But something Miller had said earlier made him hesitate. The aliens were running from something worse than themselves. Aria, display long-range sensor readings, Morrison ordered. Scan beyond the edge of the system. The AI's sensors reached out into deep space and found something that made everyone on the bridge go cold. Massive shapes were moving in the darkness between stars, ships that dwarfed even the largest Zephyrian vessels. The Devourers had finally arrived. Miller saw the readings and nodded grimly. Captain Morrison, this is why we couldn't destroy the Zephyrian Empire completely. Humanity is going to need allies for what's coming. Morrison opened a channel to the surviving Zephyrian ships. This is Captain Morrison. Your fleet is defeated, but we're offering terms for surrender. There's something you need to know about what's heading toward this galaxy. The response came from the Zephyrian flagship. Admiral Tony Reed himself spoke in broken human language. What terms do you offer, human? Morrison looked at Miller, who nodded approval. Admiral Reed, your people have been running from the Devourers for decades. So have dozens of other species. It's time to stop running and start fighting back. Asa listened as Morrison negotiated with the enemy commander. The idea of allying with the Zephyrians seemed impossible, but the sensor readings from deep space made it clear that humanity would need all the help it could get. The Devourer fleet was still months away, but it was definitely coming. Hundreds of massive vessels moving toward the galaxy like a plague of metal and death. No single species could stand against them alone. Miller activated the Vindication's historical database. Admiral Reed, let me show you what the Devourers did to the Keth Empire and the Nalan Republic and 17 other civilizations that tried to fight them alone. The images were horrific. Entire worlds stripped of all life, populations consumed by machines that turned organic matter into fuel for more ships, civilizations that had existed for thousands of years, reduced to empty space in a matter of months. Reed's voice was quiet when he spoke again. What do you propose, human Morrison? Morrison looked around the bridge of the Vindication. His crew had followed him through impossible dangers and helped him change the course of galactic history. Now they faced something even more challenging. Admiral Reed, I propose we stop fighting each other and start preparing for the real war, Morrison said. Humanity has proven we can adapt and innovate when we need to. Your people have experience fighting the Devourers. Together we might have a chance. The negotiation took several hours, but eventually terms were agreed upon. The Zephyrian Empire would end its invasion of human space. In return, humanity would share its new defensive technology and help coordinate resistance against the Devourers. Cross transported aboard the Vindication for the formal signing of the Alliance Treaty. She stood on the bridge where Morrison had changed everything and watched former enemies become reluctant partners. Kane was already working with Zephyrian scientists to understand Devourer technology. The enemy ships used principles that neither species fully understood, but human creativity combined with alien knowledge might be enough to find weaknesses. Miller sat in the captain's chair, looking older than his years. The strain of holding the timeline together was finally catching up with him. Captain Morrison, the hard part is just beginning. The Devourers won't be stopped as easily as the Zephyrians. Morrison stood at the center of the bridge and looked out at the mixed fleet of human and alien ships. Earth was safe, but the galaxy still faced extinction. The Vindication had given humanity the chance to survive. What they did with that chance would determine the future of all life in the galaxy. Aria displayed projections of the coming conflict. Captain Morrison, based on current data, the Devourer fleet will reach the Outer Rim territories in approximately 8 months. Recommended course of action is immediate preparation for defensive operations. Morrison made one final decision. Aria. Begin transmitting the Vindication's technical specifications to all Allied vessels. It's time to build a fleet that can save the galaxy.